So we're recording this Sunday of July 4th weekend. Half the season is over.
Yes.
And I remember sitting at this table before the season saying how excited we were
Full of
for
hope
baseball.
we were.
Yes. And so if you're going to start from the perspective of we love baseball, but we're Met fans, obviously, on our sleeve.
From the perspective of baseball, it has been a fantastic half of season of baseball. The rule changes, I think, for the most part, have been nothing but beneficial. The game times being down is great. It makes the game so much better to watch because I'll be honest, if I had to watch 3 hours of this Mets team play every single night, I would have killed myself by now.
And I've said it before. I reminded it a couple of weeks ago, I think, when I said I picked the Mets to win the pennant. I think they're going to play the Astros in the World Series.
Yes, I think we both.
I don't know if I don't think I know if I picked the winner, but it ain't going to matter because one of those teams is definitely not going to be there, and that would be the Mets. It's been painful.
It has been rough. Thank God for the Padres, so at least we have another high-spending team in misery with us. And it somehow makes the fact that this is the highest payroll in baseball and they are wildly underachieving, like, somehow slightly more palatable.
Don't you think Cardinal fans are saying, wait, hold my beer?
Well, I think the Cardinals, at least, they're not mega spending like the Mets and the Padres are.
Fair.
And I think even though both of us had the Cardinals in the playoffs, we were both like, eventually the devil magic is going to wear off, and it finally caught up.
I say that every year with the Rays,
right.
and I'm never right.
Well, you can clearly see the Rays' analytical approach is not a fluke. The fact that they're able to keep finding these guys, new guys year in and year out that come in and perform, clearly what they're looking at is a good way of evaluating ball players. It doesn't mean it's the best because it's not like they have a World Series to show for this, but their analytics puts them in a position where they're going to be competing for one.
Met fans would trade right now for the Rays, present and possibly the future. Right now for those things. So let's go back and talk about the rules because that was another thing we talked about at the beginning of the season, and the pitch clock probably being the most important change,
certainly the most talked about one,
and how it's impacted the games and.
Well, I mean,
any surprises?
The pitch clock is clearly the biggest rule change in baseball because without it, I mean, the first thing anybody that talking to me that isn't a baseball person asks about is the pitch clock. That's what everybody that isn't a big baseball person wants to know right now. And so I think it's interesting because I have nothing but good things to say about it. It's only made the game better, frankly.
I think the older pitchers have had a little bit more difficulty managing into it for, I guess, a variety of reasons, not only the ones where these younger pitchers might have experienced pitching with the pitch clock at the minor league level, so it's less of a change for them than it would be for Max Scherzer or even Sandy Alcantara.
Well, I think you look at the fact that older pitchers, I think pitchers' ERAs that are 30 and over are generally up this year. Now, you could say that that's maybe due to the banning of the shift or whatever, but
I'm not sure I would agree.
I don't think it would make that. That would make sense. Pitch clock would make sense because I think even if they're throwing the same number of pitches, having to throw them at that consistent rhythm is going to affect older pitchers that have never had to done that before more than even a younger pitcher that might have never done that before at a minor league level, but he's 26 and he's not 34.
And I've said this before. It's pitches per minute, really, which is what we're talking about. So you're definitely throwing more pitches per minute at what I would think would be a similar stress level. The whole thing about the guys coasting or taking it easy, so you can't do that, as we've said before in this podcast. You're going to get killed. So what I'm really interested to see is now what happens in the second half of the season when you have the buildup of all these more pitches over a shorter period of time. Do these older pitchers
break down
even more?
Even more. Do the younger pitchers start to break down? Are we going to see an even higher? I mean, I'm sure baseball would love an even higher offensive explosion in the second half.
I don't know if that was the intended consequence, but it's looking like that might be what's going to happen.
Nobody would have known, so I don't think you could have ever said Major League Baseball would have predicted it would have had this outcome. It makes sense, though, because it's also a problem that you don't need to legislate rules against because it will naturally fade over time.
What?
Pitchers getting more tired due to the
I
pitch
think that they will.
Well, as you cycle through the older pitchers.
Oh, I see. Yes.
And you get younger pitchers that are used to pitching in this environment. It's a problem that has a shelf life, I guess. Eventually, you just won't have to deal with that anymore. So even if it means for 2 or 3 seasons, second half offense is greater compared to first half offense, you don't really need to change things because of that.
And there have been some marvelous offensive performances in the first half of the season. And in addition to the pitch clock, which we think is going to play out even more importantly toward the end of the season, the limitations of throws over to first, I think, has had a bigger impact on the game than we probably even expected. We expected more stolen bases.
Not to this degree.
Not to this degree, right?
Acuna might have a 40-80 season.
Right. I like doing that, a 40-80 season. So I think that one of the best seasons ever was Eric Davis with the 37 homers and the 50 steals. Mm-hmm. This is better.
Acuna's going to do better.
Yeah. He's having an MVP season, and as far as I can see,
right now,
Corbin Carroll's had a nice year, but he hasn't done.
Corbin Carroll's going to win an award. He's going
to win the Rookie of the Year, right?
Easy going away. Even if Alvarez has an amazing second half, it's kind of hard to believe Corbin Carroll wouldn't win Rookie of the Year. But you're kind of looking at a weird year where almost a lot of the major awards are essentially already sewn up at the halfway point.
I think you're right. I had the same kind of feeling because we know what the AL MVP is going to be. Right?
Sure,
yeah. I don't even think it's not even close. And I don't care if Aaron Judge would have played every game of the season.
It wouldn't be.
He wasn't going to win the MVP in the AL this year.
Not this year.
Based on the way Ohtani's going.
The way Ohtani's playing, you can literally start talking about when could Ohtani stop playing and still win the MVP? And the answer is a lot sooner than you'd think.
Right, and as you were telling off air, so in terms of B-WAR, he's got 6.6 already, and we both said, well, 6.6 is like a very, very good, bordering elite major league season.
And he's done that before the All-Star.
So he's what he's done is unbelievable.
He's going to put up 12-something WAR this season and win the AL MVP going away.
And in a sense, he's playing for a contract.
Oh, he's going to get it.
He's playing for a contract.
And I think in the NL, I think if it's Ronald Acuna's award to lose for NL MVP right now. It's really hard for me unless the Diamondbacks get so scorching hot, led by Corbin Carroll, that they go and win the division.
Which they are in first place. They are doing that right now.
If they crush that division, like especially you almost kind of need the Padres to come back in that, because the Padres falling apart weakens the effectiveness of your claim of winning the NL West.
I think that's true, and I think the and you talk about the Diamondbacks kind of maybe poised for a fall. If the Marlins, who have also had an amazing half a season, 14 games over 500 or something like that, with a guy who's flirting with hitting 400. So if Luis Arias hits 400, does he get to be in the MVP consideration?
I think what's fun about a year like this is because you have a guy that's so dominant and so likely to win it, you kind of get to throw some names into the race a little bit more easily because you don't have to worry about Luis Arias stealing votes from somebody. That should kind of do it. We can talk about how, Arias hit 400 this year. He should be in the conversation, but he's not the MVP.
And he's not going to hit 400.
Right. It's
just so hard to do. Not because he's not great.
Right, because the problem that you're going to run into is if you have one bad week, you lose 400.
Such an outlier kind of player, right? Because, you look for him in the stolen base leaders, Arias. He's not there. He's not particularly fast.
3 home runs.
Yeah, he doesn't hit for power. He just hits them where they ain't, truly.
Right.
Slaps it around there.
And, you look at a guy, the issue is with a guy that has a hitting profile like that, like we see in last year's batting title champion and Jeff McNeil, when they're not hitting like that, they are a brutal hole in the lineup.
Yes. It looks like you're playing with a wiffle bat out there.
Right. and you know what? That could happen to Arias. He has a week where just every time he tries to hit it where they ain't, there's a guy standing there.
He's having his year. That's
he's having his year. But that's why hitting 400 is so hard, because he's got to do that for another 2.5 months.
And how about the shift? So we've had a half a season of the shift, and I will go on record as saying I was vehemently against changing this rule because I thought it was cool that baseball allowed the players to play wherever they wanted to.
It feels it's had like the nothing more than really an aesthetic impact on the game.
I don't even notice it.
Right, what I mean is
That's the problem.
You don't notice the
for
guys.
me.
You don't notice the guys shifting around, and that's probably a good thing because it never looked good, especially on TV when you would get that overhead shot of the field and like you see the
Four guys on one side, right?
It just looked bad.
Yeah. So I can't say I've missed it. I don't think the data is super strong in favor of it making hitting better, but it made everybody feel better, which is what I thought this was about. Actually,
the players like the fact that it's banned.
I hit the ball hard, and the guy wasn't standing there. It's a base hit.
Right.
Yeah.
I rifled a line drive into right field, and some guy didn't have fielded on one hop and throw me out at first base. That was stupid. I completely get that feeling as a player because you're like, it's really hard to hit a 98-mile-an-hour fastball, and I have to deal with guys standing in dumb spots. Like, that's unfair.
Something else that I picked up just the other day is that catcher's interference is up this year. And normally, I think it's about 37 CIs, catcher interference, by this time of the season. There's 58 or something like that, or 57. So they're up, and there's a reason for that, and it has nothing to do with any of the rule changes.
Oh, I thought it was going to be because guys are stealing more.
It's not. That's not what they're basically saying. That it's pitch framing. That these guys are trying to steal the pitches, and they're getting so close up to there that they're hitting the batter with the glove at a much higher rate, trying to move
like watching
in position.
Catchers have to break that habit.
Right,
next
right.
season.
So we think this is probably the last year for that because I've watched enough umpire calling. I'm sorry, man, they missed too many calls. They missed too many calls based on the box that you watch on TV.
And after the umpire game, because the thing is, imagine, baseball fans, we understand, and I'm never going to pretend that it's not hard being an umpire, that calling balls and strikes is somehow easy. But imagine if in tennis, a line judge could have a match where they got 85% of the calls right. They wouldn't be a line judge anymore.
McEnroe would have killed the guy.
Exactly. But we have baseball games where umpires routinely do worse on calling balls and strikes.
And in tennis, you were never insulted in tennis when they did all the math and they said, well, the human eye cannot place the ball on the line or in outside the line in the amount of time that the ball goes by. It's going too fast for the human eye to make a conscious. Well, that's kind of the same thing with calling a strike. It's not that much of a difference in velocity. So they're missing too many.
There's too many games where we can see real impacts on the game because of bad balls and strikes called. When a guy gets a walk, he shouldn't. When a guy gets a strikeout, he shouldn't. It changes the game in such a way that nobody benefits from it.
And it goes deeper than that because what's interesting to me is that Peterson of the Mets went to the minor leagues because he was pitching so poorly, and they said he was still having trouble at the minor leagues because they use ABS this year at AAA, and that he wasn't used to the way ABS was calling balls and strikes, so he was having a hard time. So it made me think about the adjustment that the pitchers will have to make because what was a strike it may not be a strike now, and what wasn't a strike might be a strike now.
Right. I think if you're going to have your biggest impact, it will be on your off-speed pitches because where you start them and where they're because that's going to be something that's going to change for a lot of batters because right now where your pitch breaks really isn't relevant to whether or not the guy calls it a strike if you think about it.
Right, and you at least this is going to have the same place every time where it's going to call it.
Where your ball breaks is a lot more important because you might need to start pitches in spots that you didn't start them before to ensure that they're a strike. And you might go, oh, wait, I can throw this pitch and have I can aim for that spot and it'll get called a strike even though it doesn't look like one. That's awesome.
And I feel they should make this change next year because then we should be done with rule changes for a while. Let the games just simmer for a few years.
You sit on all the current rule changes. You sit on the playoff spots. You don't mess around. You just see maybe you have a slight. I think expanding the league is a good idea because it also offsets the fact that too many teams are in the playoffs. So by having more,
a slightly smaller percentage will be in the playoffs because you got more teams. Yeah,
so I think we'll go to 34 teams soon.
Yeah. It's looking like Nashville's.
I think Nashville's going to get a team. They really want to put one there. You're going to have
Montreal is talked about as an expansion city. I still don't know. It didn't work there the first time.
Nashville was the number one choice for the players, which makes sense. Baseball is an East Coast sport, and Nashville is very convenient for a lot of people. Montreal, interestingly, was second on the players' desires as a city. I think a lot of players so really respect it as a baseball town.
And I think there's also the idea from Major League Baseball that he being Manfred and the owners want to be more international. So going back to Montreal, and then I gotta believe you're going to have a team in Mexico City or somewhere in Mexico.
The problem with the Mexico City stadium is we saw when they went there and played that game there. It's not a real stadium.
Well, they can fix that.
But you have to fix. You can't play in that.
No, you're not going to have a bandbox like that.
You couldn't have a team play in a stadium like that. It wouldn't be fair.
And then the altitude, all of that there.
Right. So, but I think you will end up with a team now in Mexico at some point.
Right. Where in Mexico, maybe Monterrey's hosted games as well.
That might not be for another expansion away. I think you're more.
It won't be in this round. I agree.
It won't be in this round. I think we'll get 2 more expansions. There's enough players, especially with the league, because the thing now is with the success of Ohtani coming over, it's not that Major League Baseball teams are going to go to Japan looking. Well, obviously, they're going to go looking for the next Shohei Ohtani, right? But they're not going to expect every player coming from Japan is. But what this has proven to them is that a 25-year-old can come over from Japan without having necessarily proved it and immediately compete at a top level in the majors. So you're going to be paying way more attention to young breakout players in the Korean league, in the Japanese league, because you're like, oh, the best guys can just come over here and play.
And we've seen that in the World Baseball Classic that they compete in. And look at the Red Sox, Masato Yoshida. Right. He's certainly, I think, been a pleasant surprise, and they're pretty happy that they signed him over. Who are they talking about signing in the outfield? They ended up not signing.
It wasn't.
Benintendi.
Right.
They were going to re-sign Benintendi. Instead, they went for Yoshida, and boy, he's had a very nice half a season. So that would be a pleasant surprise. And the Red Sox, I guess, started out as a pleasant surprise.
Yoshida. The only thing is, Yoshida's still 29. I'm saying you're going to see
get him younger, right?
Like 22 and 23-year-olds start coming over now, and you're going to see that because Ohtani has proved, because he came over at 25.
Right, and they can trust it that these guys can handle it.
Now
they weren't sure before.
Because that was always his thing, is could the kid, now they're going to see, teams are going to be more willing to take the chance because they're already willing to do that. They'll take a chance on a 16-year-old Cuban kid and put him in their developmental league. I think if you have a guy come out, he has a blazing rookie season in the NBP, teams are going to start moving in quicker now.
Do you think with the shorter games, and we've remarked a number of times, ourselves, just like, wow, it's 2 hours and 40 minutes and the game's over and they're already in postgame, that they can modify the extra innings rule and maybe get it into the 11th inning at least instead of starting it in the 10th inning?
I think watching it more, the problem is that we can't say that. We can't say, well, we want them to stop tweaking the rules on one.
I understand.
And, and be like, well, we should tweak the extra inning.
But I don't know why they're so steadfast on keeping this the way that it is.
Because it's the same way in hockey. Is that I think ultimately having the one pure inning of extra inning baseball after they already had 9 of them.
Yeah, that's like playing even strength for 5 minutes and then you go to a shootout. Right. Is what I'm talking about.
Like, do we really need that? And I don't think
apparently Major League Baseball doesn't think so.
I don't think you need it in the regular season. I think the postseason it makes sense. I'm much more okay with it in the.
I don't know if they even play with it in the postseason.
I think it's not even in the postseason. I think it's just straight in the postseason. I think
they just
and
play
that's okay because you have shootouts in postseason hockey, but I don't really need to have a clean 10th inning between the Tigers and the Twins in the middle of July. Right. Nobody is getting more out of having that. The game's already gone on for 10 innings. That's punishment enough for everyone involved.
And nobody wants to watch a Sunday night baseball game go any longer than it has to for the most part because that's a tough group to watch sometimes.
It is yeah. But I think what you're going to be looking at is that playoff baseball this year. It's going to be amazing. If you start that game at 7:30, it's going to be ending at 9:30, 10 now. That's great for your audience.
Well, of course, Major League Baseball, in its infinite wisdom, then will start the games at 9 o'clock because they get to get the West Coast, at 6 o'clock, and they're going to be in prime time, in both places. Although I think as time goes on, it's less and less important to play things in prime time, and like I think it's just people watch the World Cup whenever the heck the dang game was. So I don't really think that it has to be that way.
The vast majority of people that live in the U.S. live on the East Coast. We should probably be doing things on their time.
That's a bias right there.
It's the bias of population.
So let's think about what surprised you so far in the first half. We've already talked about our Mets disappointing us, and you want to call it surprising in the Padres and the Cardinals.
It's hard for me not to look at them. I think the Cardinals being as bad as the NL Central is probably the biggest surprise. Not so much that overall the division is ultimately still pretty middling. As good a story as the Pirates and the Reds have been, it's not like they're 15 games over 500.
I would. So here's the thing. I'm glad you said that because we talked about them as our 4th and 5th place teams, the Pirates and the Reds, and the Pirates got off to the great start, and I think we even said at the time it's a great start, and sure enough they've come back to earth, and now they're a few games under 500, and you look at that roster and you look at that team. This is not a team that's ready to compete this year, particularly without O'Neal Cruz in there. I just think that this shouldn't be the year they pull out all the stops and go for it.
And I don't think they will. I think the Reds might.
The Reds might.
Because they're like 6 games over 500.
They are tied for first place as we record today.
With the Brewers.
Of course, the record is just a few games over 500.
Yeah, they're like 42 and 36.
Something like that, 42 and 38, whatever it would be. They've got a nice team with some players that, most of us, had barely heard of before this season.
They're getting some seasons out of guys that you really wouldn't have expected.
Steer is having a great year. Ellie De La Cruz
is a stud. He's going to be a star.
And they're doing all of this without Hunter Green, who's been on the IL for a good while. Nick Lodolo hasn't pitched.
The thing is Major League fans probably know Hunter Green the best
because he throws 100 miles an hour.
But up until this season, he's never actually been that great a pitcher. He's had amazing starts here and there, but he's never really put it together.
And Edwin Diaz's brother, Alexis, has a best closer in the league.
I mean, frankly, we thought he was going to get traded to the Mets once Diaz went down, but now there's no way the Reds are selling.
No, this guy is their closer with 29 saves already. So I think the Reds, I agree with you, the Reds they should probably go for it because Votto's 38 or something like that, and maybe his leadership could help them. And I could see that team getting into the playoffs and upsetting somebody.
They're going to need to go out and get a top-of-the-line starter. You go trade for some really good pitcher at the deadline, and you make a run for it. You haven't had a playoff run, I think, in 14 seasons.
And as we saw last year, just get in the playoffs and take your chances and give it a try. The Braves seem, after the June they had and was 21-4, it seems, unbeatable.
I think another story that to me is really impressive because they're doing it without DeGrom is the Rangers. I did not think they would be this good, especially when they've basically not had DeGrom.
A lot of things, as wrong as it went for DeGrom, and obviously the team
have gone right for the Rangers,
right? And so not just the years they've gotten from Seager and Marcus Semien and Jonah Heim, who's an all-star catcher. And the team had like some ridiculous splits in terms of their clutchness and their winning, close games, which will not hold up over a season.
It sometimes does. I think that Giants team 2 years ago that won like 100-something games.
107, yeah.
107 games. They were like unbelievable in one-run games. They obviously went right back to not being unbelievable that next season, but for whatever reason, that team was just able to win one-run game after one-run game the entire year.
I don't think the Rangers will hold off the Astros for the division title.
I think the Astros have too much pitching.
And with a lot of guys being hurt, by the way.
With a lot of guys, but that's what I mean.
McCullers is out for the year.
They're going to have guys come back.
Garcia's out for the year.
They're still going to have guys come back.
Yep.
And that lineup with Abreu kind of figuring.
They're just professional hitters.
Right.
Every guy in that lineup.
You worry about, Nate Eovaldi's been phenomenal for the Rangers.
Right. I think the same thing.
But I've seen a lot of Nate Eovaldi in New York. He has some stinkers in him.
Yeah, and could be at the worst possible time. And they have Sonny Gray, who's having a crazy good year too, right? Yeah.
Right. And I think that's like, if you're a Met fan, that's where you're frustrated because you look at guys. Those were guys you could have had Sonny Gray, and instead you've had Quintana.
Could have had Taijuan Walker and Chris Bassett too, because they pitched for you last year.
Quintana, who's
hasn't thrown a ball for them.
You know what? Scherzer and Verlander actually since mid-May have been really good. They're 6-2 with an under 3 ERA.
They've been good, but I feel like that they pitched not as well as their record indicates.
Right. You would look at their record and be like, really? I remember we were like looking at Scherzer's record, like he's actually pitched this well?
Yeah. So it's just,
Senga always, it seems like whenever we're like, it seems like I never watch Senga when he has his good starts. I know he has them, it's just I'm never watching them apparently.
It's just a team, and let's go into that, right? Because the Mets are out of the playoff race and most likely not going to get back into it. We think they're pretty much done. That everything they do comes out wrong. right now. It's just one of those years.
That happens, and you might be having the reverse of that in Miami, where everything that team touches turns to, well, up until Perez was having the unbelievable season, up until the Braves knocked him around yesterday.
Yeah, 6 runs in the first inning.
Get knocked out.
But I think everything went wrong for the Mets, and they lack something a good team has, which is clutchness. When the team is down, right? If
they had that last year.
Right, they had that last year. So last year it was so good, and this year it's the complete opposite. Like if they're down, or if they don't never win a game to come from behind, it feels like they haven't done that in 3 months.
And last year they did it. It felt like every other week,
and they just all a bunch of hangdog expressions. It kind of just pervades the team.
Sometimes that happens in a season, and you.
It's not the manager who's going to fire them up and get them. They're trying.
Right. It's just nothing.
They're just failing.
Sometimes it happens that way, and I think you forget this kind of season gets papered over in your memory. You don't the pain when it's not as fresh. You don't remember just how awful it was watching it. It becomes a lot easier to be like, the breaks just didn't go their way that year. It happens.
The stage I'm at right now is they have to show me that I should watch more avidly, because I've sort of lifted, like I got to watch all the time. I got to make sure that I'm in my seat.
Like last year, I
way.
was like, I got to make sure to watch as many games as I could. Now it's kind of just like, I might check in the third or fourth inning, see how they're doing.
And it's as bad like on the side. So the Braves have had ridiculous stats on the first inning, where the Braves have outscored the opposition, like 37-5 or something like that.
The Mets are always down in the first inning.
The Mets have the worst record in the first inning. They've scored the fewest runs and given up the most of any team. So basically, every game you start watching the Mets, they're behind before it's 7:30.
Right.
So it's just like you just
makes
get
it depressing.
I don't need to watch this. I like to sleep at night.
Really, ultimately, the Mets have about a month and a half, because their biggest issue is come September. The only thing that people are going to be talking about is the Jets.
Yeah, well, that'll be good for the Mets at that point.
Right.
So, and the Marlins, I don't expect them to, go in there and if they finished at 500 or just over, I think that'd be a great accomplishment. Considering they're 14 games over, that's saying that they're going to have a worse second half than the first half, which is what I think is going to happen.
It's hard not to expect them to fall back a little. I don't know if they'll fall 14 games back, because that actually relies on them being pretty actively bad in the second half.
And Alan Contra really has just started to pitch better, and done all this without him being at his best.
I could see them coming in at just a few games above 500, which would still be an incredible season.
A big turnaround. The Phillies are lurking.
Right. That could be the issue, is if all of a sudden the Phillies get hot and then the Mets start playing better, the Marlins might fall back, not through really any fault of their own, just the competition around them gets stiffer.
And do you think the Diamondbacks will hold on and win the division in the West behind clear Cy Young candidate Zach Gallen, right? So you said the same thing about the awards. I think he's the clear Cy Young.
He's the clear Cy Young in the
McClanahan probably in the AL, but go ahead.
Or Ohtani. Like that's going to be
not Cy Young.
No. Ohtani will probably win the MVP, because it's their way of rewarding him for his pitching.
There's nobody like you. You win.
But I think, will the Diamondbacks hold on? I want them to.
Yeah, I kind of feel that it would be cool for
baseball,
the Dodgers and the Padres to go, the Diamondbacks?
Right. It's good. The NL West finally isn't run by the triumvirate.
And they came a long way. Last year, they were a pretty bad team.
Right. And I think I worry about them, because the Padres shouldn't be as bad as they are, and they keep finding ways to lose games.
Oh, we know what that looks like.
Right. So what happens if the Padres starts playing better? And they're not now. They're helped out by the fact that the Giants are
playing well,
pesky, but they're not great. They're just pesky.
But man, and I think I've got to give the manager a little cred here that
Dave Kapler.
He got
Rockies suck.
He got these guys to play his kind of ball, and they're a tough team.
Right.
They're a tough team.
That could be the thing. The best thing that happens is that neither the Dodgers or the Padres have shown the kind of life that
are quite as good you thought they were going to be.
To go and really run down the Diamondbacks.
I think
you need both the Diamondbacks to fall back and one of those two, one of the teams in the NL West to turn it on. Really, just being the Dodgers. So I think they might hold on, but they could limp across the finish line.
I think if Zach Gallen doesn't go something like he's 10-2 now,
21-3.
Yes, he basically shouldn't lose in the second half, because the rest of that starting pitching, it just seems paper thin to me.
Zach Gallen loss is painful.
Yeah. So they've gotten a lot out of their bullpen so far. I don't know if that'll hold up.
That's always a scary thing.
Yeah, it's a tough place to.
Had a lot of bullpen
a lot
success.
of things gone their way so far. So
Right.
okay, and in the American League. Well, the Rays, we've already talked about them. They're amazing. They hit home runs now like no team we've ever seen.
The Yankees struggling as much as they has been, but Judge going down is such a blow to that lineup that they're functionally not the same team if he's not there.
And I think it's interesting how the Yankees can, quote unquote, get away with the whole Aaron Judge thing, right? So he's in the game. He makes the catch against the wall. He stubs his toe. He's got a toe problem.
And there's a bunch of weird, inconsistent reports.
And then, maybe it hurts more than he thought until he can handle the pain. And now,
and then Judge just comes out.
He may not play the rest of the year. Some people are saying.
He just comes out and he's like, "Oh, yeah, by the way, I have a torn ligament in my toe."
Right.
And like for weeks, the Yankees were acting like everything was fine.
That didn't happen like after the fact. That happened right then. So the Yankees can kind of handle burying this injury for some weird reason. I don't understand why, but there's a lot of juice taken out of the league and obviously of the Yankees without Aaron Judge being in the lineup.
Right, and it's even more brutal for them because everybody, with the Red Sox being better than we expected, everybody in that division is good.
So here's the thing: if the season ended today, the Red Sox are 42-42 in last place in the AL East. The Minnesota Twins are tied for first place in the American League Central at 42-42.
Yeah, that doesn't seem fair.
So you'd be in first place, in one division. You're in last place in the other division. So there you go. That's all you really need to know.
Brutal AL East, the AL Central, the Guardians falling apart as quickly as they have.
That's disappointing.
Disappointing.
Yeah.
I thought they were going to I didn't expect.
And they lost their manager. I feel bad for Terry.
I didn't think Andres Jimenez was going to be as good as he was last year because he did not profile to be that level of player. But I didn't think he would kind of just like fall off a cliff. Basically, he's turned back into the pumpkin essentially.
Yeah, it's such a strange team because you look at the individual parts of that team, you think they should be really good, I think.
I think the only thing is you look at that lineup and you go, okay, if Jose Ramirez isn't hitting 45 home runs, who the hell is hitting the ball?
What happened to Oscar Gonzalez? Wasn't he like the hero of the playoffs last year? I don't think.
The thing was, you knew Josh Bell wasn't going to be the power. I've watched too much Josh Bell in Washington that I know that he's not the power injection that lineup was looking for.
But Bo Naylor gets, one of the signature plays of the first half on his throw-out stealing. Did you see the play where he reached on a pitch out behind him, did a full 360, fired the ball, and got him? That's one of the best plays I've seen in a really long time.
But that division has been disappointing. I don't know if I could say it's disappointing because we expected them to be disappointing.
Right, we only had one team coming out of there.
They weren't going to be. We knew both the Centrals this year were going to be weak. I think the thing that surprised me is that it's the Marlins that are strong in the NL East.
Sure,
and the Mets.
The Diamondbacks, having a chance.
The Diamondbacks,
the Reds.
The NL, I think the AL West being stronger than I expected, and the NL West being weaker than I expected. That's really the biggest discrepancy for me.
So let's quickly finish up with the buyers and sellers, right? So then we know who we said the Reds are still in it, and so the Pirates we said should be sellers. How about the Cubs?
Sellers.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I think so.
How
about the Cardinals?
You should sell.
Okay, but go back to the Cubs then. What are you doing with the Cubs? Marcus Stroman is going to be traded, right?
Oh, yeah. He could become a Red.
That's a really good call. Yeah, I think I've heard that actually too. Yeah, I think that's a good call. And I think the Cubs are actually not that far away.
The Cubs are.
They're just not this year.
With the other teams doing well, there's not a reason to push to go all in when you were never planning on doing that in the first spot. I think the Angels, the Mariners, and the Rangers will all be buyers.
Wow.
Because they all have a shot at dethroning the Astros.
Interestingly enough, in a division, right, where they're neither of the two teams at the top of the division, which is really, the Rangers are, I'm sorry.
Right, but you're going to have a lot of buyers in that division because they're all going to say, this is our chance to go after the Astros. We got to strike while we can.
Well, not only the Astros, so if the Yankees are without Aaron Judge, they're not as formidable a playoff contender.
Right, you're really only you're watching for the A's mostly. The Rays mostly coming out.
Right, and maybe the Blue Jays. I still believe in the Blue Jays.
But as a World Series contender, you're not sure yet.
Right.
So you're thinking if you're an AL West team, you're like, you win the division, you get the Patsy NL Central team. You're cruising.
Right. So if I were to sort of switch right now, I would say that maybe the Yankees are less tenuous, have a tenuous hold on a playoff spot. I would still pick the Jays, believe it or not, because they're going to get Hyun-Jin Ryu back, and I think their pitching will definitely get better. Alek Manoah is not giving them nothing.
Yeah, and I think in the NL you'll have the Braves, the Diamondbacks, and then it's going to be a dogfight for the rest of the spots, I think.
Well, so are you going
It's
to
going to be open. It's going to be wide
Dodgers
open.
and Padres?
Dodgers and
Padres.
Padres.
It's easy to say Braves, Diamondbacks, and Dodgers. If you're going to say Reds or Brewers,
Reds or Brewers, but then you're going to have a ton of people fighting
for that last stuff. Right? The Phillies,
the
Padres.
Giants, the Padres.
Yeah.
The Mets could still theoretically get hot. That possibility exists.
What Mets? The New York Mets?
Right. The Marlins are in that. You have to count the Marlins.
Yeah, you can't count them out. And like you said, the young pitcher they've got in there, sort of like you didn't expect that to happen after you traded
So
Pablo Lopez.
It's going to be very fun. I think it's going to be a really fun second half of the season. I think it's going to be a phenomenal playoffs this year.
And I think, as you said, the best thing is that some of these teams that haven't been good for a long time, like the Reds and the Diamondbacks and the Rangers, it's fun to have them in there and competing.
It's fun not to be sitting here talking about the inevitable Dodgers Braves NLCS because it's not inevitable this year, and that's fantastic.
Absolutely.